Mr. President, it's an honor and privilege to be here on the Senate floor today on this cause. Young athletes across this country dedicate years, sometimes decades, of their lives to earn their spot on the world stage representing the United States at the Olympics. Standing on that podium, they should be proud of their hard work that earned them that place, that honor of wearing our flag's colors at the Games. But no athlete, whether an amateur athlete or an Olympian, should have to endure abuse and mistreatment to pursue the sport they love. Were it not for the pandemic, hundreds of our athletes would have been in Tokyo right now, representing the United States of America at the Olympics. Even though our athletes are unable to compete today, we owe it to them to create for future athletes and future competitors a safe place in which to compete. Today's passage of Senate Bill 2330 marks a step toward providing effective safeguards and protection to Olympic, Paralympic, and amateur athletes across the nation. On January 25th, 2018, the day after Dr. Larry Nassar was sentenced to life in prison, as chairman of the Commerce Subcommittee with jurisdiction and oversight over the health and safety of amateur athletes, I opened an investigation with my ranking member, Senator Blumenthal, into how the USA Gymnastics, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and Michigan State University allowed girls and young women to be assaulted and abused over 2 decades. Nassar was ultimately sentenced to 40 to 175 years in prison for his heinous crimes. But the fight to overhaul a system that had allowed him to evade justice and accountability was far, far from over. Over the next 18 months, we conducted hundreds of interviews with athlete survivors, reviewed over 70,000 pages of documents, and held 4 subcommittee hearings, including listening to the horrific stories from survivors, issuing subpoenas to leaders who failed these athletes, watching those who were charged to protect them plead the Fifth, and even referring witnesses to the Justice Department for failure to tell the truth. Senator Blumenthal and I stood in the Russell Senate office building with more than 80 courageous survivors of abuse. Some of these women had been assaulted by Nassar while competing at the Olympics, some while training with the national team, others while attending Michigan State. One by one, they told us the organizations that were supposed to protect them had failed them. One person's abuse is too much. But the question asked that day by one of the athletes is, why was there more than one? A question that has stayed with me since spoken. Not only do we condemn the abuse, but we condemn those who allowed it to continue, who failed in their responsibilities as human beings, as well as their professional capacity to care and to protect these young men and women. Our bipartisan effort, Senator Blumenthal and I, culminated in production of a comprehensive investigative report, which is this document here. Significant work for a serious challenge. And it also resulted in S-2330, the Empowering Olympic, Paralympic, and Amateur Athletes Act, the bill we are on today. This legislation is intended to strengthen legal liabilities and accountability mechanisms in the governance structure of the Olympic organizations, restore a culture that puts athletes first through clear procedures and reporting requirements, and fortify the independence and capabilities of the U.S. Center for Safe Sport through dependable funding and oversight. During the November 13, 2019 markup of this legislation in the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, our colleagues provided thoughtful input through amendments to strengthen this legislation. As such, I take this moment to thank my colleague, Senator Cantwell, Senator Peters and Grassley, and Senator Thune for their efforts in improving the legislation to put us in the position that we are in today. I would like to specifically thank Senator Lee for his input in the markup and his continued contribution to the legislation to improve the processes governed by the bill. Additionally, Senator Grassley, his leadership on this legislation was, Senator Gardner, his leadership on this legislation was paramount to Senate Bill 2330's successful passage just a few moments ago. Senator Gardner's own legislation to establish a commission to study the broader issues within the Olympic and Paralympic movement strengthens our ability to guide future oversight efforts, and his support, Senator Gardner's, for this package was critical. I would be remiss not to thank Senator Wicker, the chairman of the full committee, for his continued support as the jurisdictional chairman of the Commerce Committee. From the early stages of this effort and the support of his predecessor, Senator Thune, then the chairman of the Commerce Committee, who was fundamental in this effort gaining the momentum it needed to get us to the point we are at now. Finally, this entire effort would not have been possible if not for the tireless and thorough work of Senator Blumenthal and his staff. Serving as chairman and ranking member of the same Commerce Subcommittee has allowed us to work on a number of important issues and legislative items together. But I can honestly say this effort could very well be one of the most important bipartisan efforts and pieces of legislation resulting therefrom that I have been a part of as a United States Senator. I thank Senator Blumenthal for his leadership and his team's efforts, again, to see that these survivors' answers could be attained and their safety protected in the future. Most importantly, if there is anyone who deserves thanks and gratitude, it is the athletes and survivors for their exceptional bravery. The bravery they demonstrated through their willingness to share their stories, to tell what happened to them, to talk to us, and to talk to the rest of the world. This legislation and the prior investigation are only possible because of the hundreds of courageous and selfless survivors who spoke out against abuse, shared their stories, and offered input on how we can create change to make certain all future athletes can participate in the sports they love without fear of abuse. I especially want to recognize the athletes who we worked with and who shared their circumstances with us during our committee hearings and in a number of meetings and phone calls over 2.5 years. Jordan Weaver, Jamie Dancer, Allie Reisman, Michaela Maroney, Maggie Nichols, Rachel Denhollander, Jeanette Antolin, Emily Getz, Jessica Howard, Sarah Klein, Kaylee Lorenz, Morgan McCall, Hannah Morrow, Bridie Farrell, and Craig Moritzi. We told these survivors that while powerful institutions had failed them in the past, we, our subcommittee, the committee, and the Senate were not going to. I would also like to thank the staff and individuals who have advocated for our athletes. On my staff, George Redden, Matthew Bessio, Tom Bush, Mark Crowley, Connor McGrath, Morgan Sade, Trent Kennedy, Angela Ling, Miranda Moore, and Tom Brandt. On Senator Wicker's staff, Olivia Trusty, Chapin Greger, Tyler Levins, Crystal Tully, and John Keast. And on Senator Thune's staff, Peter Feldman, Jason Van Beek, and Nick Rossi. Despite the Olympics being postponed and everything that is going on around the world today, I am grateful that we were able to deliver good news and take this step today. We are not done. We intend to keep that promise and get this bill across the finish line. We now will continue to work with our colleagues in the House of Representatives and the White House to ensure the timely consideration and enactment of the Empowering Olympic, Paralympic, and Amateur Athletes Act of 2020. One is too many, but why was there ever more than one? May we never have to ask that question again and may there never be one in the first place. Mr. President, I yield to the ranking member, the senator from Connecticut.